Hello all, and welcome to the 2023 Southeast Collaborative Online Conference. My name is Cindy, and I'll be your host for this session, Managing Up with Resiliency. This event is supported through funding from the Library Services and Technology Act through the Institute of Museum and Library Services. Please feel free to ask questions or make comments in the chat or interact with other attendees and the speaker within the Whova app for this presentation. And now I'd like to introduce Sonya Norris. Thanks for being with us.
And thank you, Cindy. Thank you to the audience for joining me to talk about managing up with resiliency. My name is Sonya Schryer Norris, and I am the Niche Academy consultant for the Library of Virginia. I appreciate that you're here, and I hope that you'll be able to take away both concrete suggestions for how to have a more productive relationship with your manager, as well as concrete skills and methods that will help you cultivate your resiliency in the workplace. So I have always been clear in my own mind that I have no interest in being a manager. I have had great bosses. I have watched friends become library directors, people that I knew in library school, and I have heard family members talk about what it's like to be in difficult management situations around the Thanksgiving dinner table. And it is not for me. Yet I still need to manage my relationship with my supervisors. And so I am invested in making those relationships work. So the definition that I'm going to use today for managing up is from idealist.org. And I really like this one. Managing up is a method of career development that's based on consciously working for the mutual benefit of yourself and your boss. And where this presentation is going to concentrate is on your own internal development of resiliency in the process of the mutual benefit of yourself and your boss. It's common when talking about managing up to focus on ideas such as institutional direction and organizational priorities. But today we're going to talk about managing yourself to further your career development. So all of these things that are coming up on the screen about managing up hold true pretty much any time, but even more so during difficult periods. Your capacity to influence your manager is directly tied to key capacities that you have sole control over. And in this hour, we'll talk about cultivating your capacity to manage, being easy to say no to when it's all about you to tell the truth, accepting clarity as kindness, and figuring out what your boss wants and giving it to them. Our focus is going to be on cultivating your resiliency to meet those goals. And the structure that we will be working with is from Dr. Shona Walters at Better Up. So we're going to cover 4 characteristics that resilient people embody. We're going to talk about having a realistic sense of control over your choices, and then an understanding of the limits of that control. We're going to talk about having a high tolerance for negative affect from other people. We're going to talk about having an optimistic outlook. And we're going to talk about having a high level of adaptability. And I'll be talking about each of these things with specific examples. As hard as these skills are to develop, the dividends they pay to our future selves in our professional lives, as well as our personal lives, make that work worth it. Once again, these are skills and attitudes that are 100% within our control to cultivate. Sometimes in the work environment, we focus on productivity to the exclusion of the personal and internal work. But that work is also necessary to be successful in the workplace. So let's start with talking about no. So bosses spend professional development time learning the most effective methods of how to make no stick. So saying no can cause friction. It can be awkward, unpleasant, and anxiety producing for the person who is saying no. And this is where we're going to be talking about the resiliency characteristic of having a high tolerance for negative affect. It can also be awkward, unpleasant, and anxiety producing for you to hear no. And in those moments, you're going to need to be able to tolerate and work with their negativity. So bosses have competing priorities. And sometimes your boss will explain their competing priorities, and sometimes they won't. Sometimes I really think that my manager should have said yes. I think I should have been invited to the table to negotiate the matter. And when I have not been invited to problem solve, when I have been told no, I try to be cool. Y'all, I am not cool. I am driven. I am determined. It is fair to say that I am uptight. And what I want is vitally important to me and to the patrons, and I am sure of that. So I act cool while I'm being told no, because the answer is still no, at least right at that moment. Let's focus on that moment of no where the negative affect may be highest. Concentrate on responding through your body language while they're talking. This is a really neat trick. So relax by opening your hands. It's not conspicuous, but it will help you to be receptive. And it's also strangely difficult during a tense conversation. But it's very helpful while you are doing the hard work of tolerating another person's negative affect. Listening is hard work, and it's within your control. At that moment, just listen. Don't defend yourself. And we're going to talk more about cultivating that ability so that you can really hear what your manager is saying. So first, pay attention. Pay attention to what they are saying, and don't focus, at least for that moment, on your thoughts and feelings about it. Withhold judgment. This is really hard, but it is also respectful. So extend them that respect. reflect, really think about what they're saying. Reflect on whether this is something that is a time-based no, like, oh, this could change in 6 months, or whether it's less movable, like the library mission. Clarify any points that you are unclear about. Summarize what they're saying and share it back to them so that you both understand the same points, even if you don't agree on those points. And then give yourself a pat on the back because your part of that conversation, the listening part, was hard and it was work. This is a situation where we need to engage a high tolerance for negative affect. It is very difficult to be told no. It is very difficult to listen when you're not hearing what you want to hear. And there are very few supervisors who can make it easy to hear no. But you still need to hear them. You still need to work with what they're saying. And you still need to get past the difficulty of the interaction. And so this is where having a high tolerance for negative affect comes into play. Don't let the negativity or the difficulty of the situation perpetuate negativity going forward. So let's look at a couple of ways to work with being told no. So remember, your supervisor has people telling them no too. They may agree with you 100%. They may think that your plan is the single best idea on the subject they have ever heard. They may think the same thing and think that your ideas about carrying it forward are even better than theirs. But they have people telling them no too. So remember that they may be doing something that's hard for them when they are saying no because they agree with you. It's not always about you, and it's not always about them. So saying no to an employee who wants to do something that they don't have the time for or aren't the best person for the job in the library is hard on a manager. And they have to bring all of their skills to the table when they have to say no. And it's important to recognize the job of the manager. They need to coach and encourage staff members. They need to make sure that their staff members are learning new skills. They have to assign projects and responsibilities that will help the person develop. And your idea may not be part of their plan for developing you as an employee. So you need to understand your role. You can do great work in any position in a library. It's okay to outgrow your role, the role you were hired for. Your ideas may be outside of your current role. And sometimes we can change roles within the library where we're at when we grow. And sometimes we can't. And that's nobody's fault. Nobody has done anything wrong. Once again, part of a manager's job is to build a strong team. And that means that each individual has a role to play, and they may need you in your current role. So don't back your boss into a corner. Sometimes we are so concerned with stating our opinion or making sure that our boss understands our great idea that we unwittingly and unintentionally back them into a corner. we start, this us them mentality. So you always want to give your boss space to say yes later without feeling like they gave in to you or lost an argument. So let's move on to the next big concept for today. Clearly, everything that happens on the job is about me, including whether I tell the truth. There is no substitute for the reputation that we establish when we always tell the truth, even when it's hard on us and even when it's hard on our supervisor. Whenever I am mentoring another librarian, this is something that I always really try to pass on. Telling the truth is 100% within our control, and it pays huge dividends. And the resiliency skill that we will be talking about in this section around telling the truth is having a high level of adaptability. So you have sole authority and discretion over what you say and what you do not say. If you want to be heard, tell the truth. I say this because delivering on what you say is the most powerful form of speech. When the people around you know that you mean what you say, that you do what you say you will, they will pay attention to what you say. And if what you really want is power and influence, tell the truth. Telling the truth will bring you power beyond your wildest dreams to make good things happen. And I'm going to talk in a minute about a circumstance where a woman's word was literal currency. But let's pause for a second to talk about knowing what the truth is, because it's not always obvious or simple. So who determines what the truth is? You and your manager may both be speaking the truth, and you may have different truths that are impacted by different priorities. There are competing truths. What is true for you may be beside the point for your boss. They may be focused on something else entirely. So, for instance, it may be true for you that the collection development budget you are working with is insufficient to the needs of your community. And it may be true for your middle manager that the library director was compelled to spend a disproportionate amount of library resources on a plumbing problem this year. And now your middle manager has a reduced budget for collection development, and they are spending a disproportionate amount of time getting estimates from plumbers. So this is the place where I talk about truth being as good as gold. So I was watching a movie about gamblers, and the central character, whose name was Ruth, gambled a great deal. And she sent condolences to the family of an enemy of hers who had been murdered. And the murdered person's family asked the message bearer if Ruth was being genuine in her condolences, or if there was some kind of trick here. And the message bearer replied that Ruth's word was as good as gold in that town, and that it had to be because she gambles. And that story made a real impression on me, that in order for people to rely on what Ruth had to say about money, about extending or receiving credit, about her ability to pay her debts, about how she approached her fiscal obligations. She had to have a reputation as a person who did not play fast and loose with the truth, that she could be trusted. Another important part of telling your manager the truth is to set appropriate expectations. So here's a good example. If your supervisor asks you to do something, but doesn't give you a specific deadline, and you plan to get it done that day right away, don't promise to get it done that day. Sure, your boss will probably be happy that you got it done in one day, but it's not what they asked for, so it's not what they need. And let's say another priority task comes up and you don't get to their project immediately. If you've told them you will get it done that day and you don't, you've let them down on an expectation they didn't bring to the table in the first place. Under promise and over deliver. Under promise and over deliver. That establishes a situation where you are consistently meeting expectations. Here is a quote from Mark Twain that I really like. I was gratified to be able to answer promptly, and I did. I said I didn't know. So another thing that's important to remember about telling the truth is to admit what we don't know. It is very tempting to promise to give our supervisors something that is important to them. If they ask for the weeding project to be completed by December 31st, because that was a part of their plan for the library for the year, but you don't know that you are going to be able to meet that goal, don't say that you will meet that goal. And the more important the task is, the more important it is to admit what we don't know and to be clear about that. Here are some phrases you can use in the moment when a supervisor asks you about something and you don't have an immediate response, or if you feel pressured to give an answer right away. The first statement, I'm going to need to think about that and I'll get back to you, is a good one when you're asked to complete a project within certain parameters or with a particular deadline. You don't want to agree to something that you may not be able to do. Just take your time, take a moment to think about what you're going to need to meet your boss's expectations. And if you cannot meet their expectations in this matter, think about how to work alongside them for the best outcome. If your boss comes up to you with an exciting idea, this second phrase, that sounds interesting, I'll need to think about it, can be helpful. So it is really tempting to jump right into what your boss wants, especially when you also think it's exciting, but it's important to give yourself time to think about it first. Let your boss know what you need so you can get your job done and they can get their job done. Always ask for what you need. If you need time from other staff members, if you need money, let them know, especially when you don't know whether you can get them what they need. It is a manager's job to rally resources, and they may have resources that you're unaware of. And if part of what you need is money, provide them with a budget. So when you or your project is in trouble, you want to realize that there are levels of being in trouble. You don't want to be the second person that told your supervisor that the project was in trouble. If something has gone wrong, or if you're not going to meet a deadline, be the first one to tell your manager. if a project is failing, matters are only going to get worse the longer the project is failing without being corrected. Ask your boss for help, let them know what the problem is, and invite them to help solve it with you. So, first person that we have to tell the truth to is ourselves. I know that I have acted out of jealousy or anger, and I have spoken strongly out of a feeling of moral rectitude or an internal pressure that is solely my pressure to right somebody else's wrongs. I've used bad judgment, and I have made poor choices in the workplace. And it can be really tempting when I feel like I am in the right to blame other people when things are going wrong. But in order to get myself out of the hole, even if it is only a hole in my own mind, I have to be truthful about my part of the problem. And so the first person I have to tell the truth to is myself. So let's talk about some things that we can't control. We can't control whether our boss tells us the truth in return. We cannot control how much of it they say or the ways in which they say it. We can't control if our supervisors tell other people what they believe to be true, whether that helps us or hurts us. We have no control over what they say to anyone else. And we can't control whether they're telling themselves the truth or our version of what's true. So this is a situation where we need to have a high level of adaptability. You don't need to agree with things that are simply untrue, but you do need to be able to adapt to a situation where other people's truths are in play. You'll also need to adapt to situations where other people are not telling the truth, not to themselves and not to you. Working in a situation where what you believe to be true is not what's happening can leave you feeling like you have given in or compromised in a way that you're just not comfortable with. And it doesn't have to be that way. You do not have responsibility for what other people think or do. You cannot control what other people think. You cannot control what other people do. But you do have control over how you choose to work with other people when you don't agree with them. And that's the kind of adaptability I'm talking about. Not giving in or pretending to agree with other people, but working alongside them, even when you do not agree. We are not always going to get things our way, even when we are right, even when we have expressed ourselves clearly and professionally. And so what that leaves us with is a need to adapt to the situation that is different than the situation that we wanted. I have worked in situations and on projects where I have explained my position. I have said that I think the other person's approach is not going to work. It's not going to be effective, and that I think a different direction is called for. And then I've said, and now I will do everything I can to make your idea a success. Disagreeing doesn't need to start a fight. It doesn't need to get the other person's back up. And yes, I have said that phrase, and now I will do everything I can to make your idea a success, multiple times on the same project. There's one project I remember where I said it about every 6 months for about 3 years. And after each time I said it, I worked hard to help realize their vision. And you may not realize it, but you're actually lucky because you don't have to like the situation. You just have to adapt to it. So the next resiliency skill we're going to talk about is having an optimistic outlook. So I try to bring my best self to work, and I don't always make it. Sometimes my best fails because my boss has been eating kittens for breakfast. They are being mean. They are acting out of character. And I have decided that I can no longer trust them or rely on them. They are so obviously unreasonable that there is no way this relationship can work. I tried hard, and they failed me. And when I have come to that conclusion, I act as if my boss is bringing their best self too, that they have noble intentions, and I extend grace to both of us. Always make space for your boss to extend you grace too. So sometimes my best isn't very good, and sometimes theirs isn't either. And this is where we need to build a foundation of kindness. And let me show you some ways that you can start. When you find yourself in conflict with your manager, cultivate kindness toward them. And here are a couple of really practical ways to do this. Write down things that they have done for you or for other staff members. If they have ever bought you pizza, stop and think what toppings were on the slice you ate. Were there mushrooms? Was there pepperoni? Write down those toppings. If they've ever brought in donuts, draw a picture of that box of donuts and try to remember the different kinds that were in the box. Use crayons or pencils or anything you want, but literally draw the box of donuts. Kindness doesn't mean selling out. It doesn't mean selling out what's true for you. It doesn't mean not recognizing what you believe the truth is. We all need to grow empathy muscles and to be kind, for everyone you meet is fighting a hard battle. Listen generously. Relax judgment. It doesn't always feel true, but I believe that it is true that you cannot go wrong by acting from a heart of kindness. And the best place is to start with self-compassion. Be kind to yourself. I have a reference here on the slide from Positive Psychology, and they talk about how to practice self-compassion. The tips are from psychologist and business school graduate Catherine Moore. Positive psychology includes references to free workbooks, audio courses, very practical self-affirmations, as well as exercises. And one of those exercises is to write a self-compassion letter. And let me tell you about my first self-compassion letter. I had been in charge of buying a service for the library, and the cost kept going up. And by the third year, I knew that we were paying too much, but I didn't know how to break off the relationship with the very smooth vendor's sales agent, and then go about finding a different company that could do what we needed for less money. And I felt really guilty for a long time about paying too much for something when it was my job to figure out the best value for that service. But after I wrote that letter, I felt better. I had forgiven myself, and it gave me some perspective on mistakes that other people make in the workplace. So resolve that when you are offered donuts by your boss, that you are a person who chooses the donut with sprinkles, because it is very difficult to harbor a hard heart when you are eating sprinkles. So this is where that resiliency skill of having an optimistic outlook comes into play. We all need to cultivate optimism, to build it. It takes action. We can't just be optimistic about what excites us. And we need to dig deep to be optimistic about things that are hard, such as extending grace to someone that you don't feel deserves it, or someone that you are having a really difficult time not judging. Optimism doesn't mean that you're not a realist. It doesn't mean you lie to yourself, but it does take work and it does take creativity. Okay, so the next resiliency skill that we're going to talk about is having a realistic appreciation for what is under your control and the limitations of your control. So let's say your boss is wound super tight about the font size you use in emails. It does not matter what font size your boss prefers. Just give it to them. Let's say your boss wants a website where the key information is above the fold. And you're thinking, that's not even a thing anymore. Doesn't matter. Ask them what their screen resolution is, or walk them through figuring that out, and then make sure the key information is above the fold on their screen. If they want more text than you think a website should have, or more images than you think it should have, don't worry about it. Let it go. It doesn't matter. Just give it to them. It's not about whether you are right. It's about recognizing your role within the library. Challenging your boss about, minor issues like this is not going to win you any points. And so let's next talk about bumping up the difficulty level when our bosses are asking for something. What if it's something that is extremely important to you, personally or professionally? If you are wondering whether that issue is a hill you want to die on, it probably isn't. Ultimately, almost no single issue is worth quitting a good job over. And if you are thinking seriously about quitting a job, ask yourself whether the situation that you're in is a problem that you need to solve, a problem that you need to fix for yourself by disengaging, or a conflict that needs to be managed. It's okay to have conflicts in the workplace that require relaxing judgment, having a high tolerance for negative affect, and being patient. That conflict may resolve itself. But once you've left the library, you've eliminated the possibility that in 6 or 12 months, one of 1,000 different things could have resolved even the most difficult conflict. And here's a really important part. No issue that you can't resolve except by separating from your employer is worth risking your ability to find another job. If you can't save them from yourselves, at least save yourself. So you want to be careful about how you frame struggles with your boss in your mind or when you talk about those struggles with other people. Even when you're venting, don't lock yourself into a defensive position that is hard for you to back out of. If you frame the conflict as a moral dilemma or an ethical or values-based imperative, it can be especially difficult to back down. While some issues are ethical, most are not. And it is easy to slip into a position of self-satisfaction or one where you blow up a simple situation into one where your way to fix it makes you the values hero. So I have certainly played the role of Miss Bertha Better Values than you at work. And it has never helped. Never, not once. So what about when it's bad with your boss, but it's not that bad? You can disagree on something. You can disagree on a lot of things, and you can still do great work together. So do great work. As a matter of fact, even when it is really, really bad, do great work. If your boss were to draw a line down a piece of paper, and on one side, they list the people who help the library do a good job, and on the other side, they list the people that get in the way of the library doing a good job, you know which side you want to be on. You cannot go wrong by doing great work. And this is where having a realistic sense of control over your choices and an understanding of the limitations of that control come into play. Oftentimes, you need to balance what you think is right with what is important. You can choose to fight with your boss over your email signature file or how often your library posts to social media, but you will probably lose more than you gain. And then there are the choices we make about how we're going to frame situations. Sometimes it is best to let a bad situation roll off our shoulders, just to let things go and recognize that realistically, we did not have control over them. Try not to frame it as a failure when you don't have control over a particular situation, but just a recognition of the limits of your control. My next topic is on supervisory communication. Supervisors are encouraged to be clear with employees, and clarity is kindness. And so accept it as kindness. Hearing things that we don't want to hear can bring up difficult emotions. It can make you feel defensive. It can make you feel like your boss didn't really hear you, because if they'd heard you, they would be doing what you wanted. Sometimes you are convinced that you are in the right, and sometimes you think they were just mean about it and they shouldn't have been mean. Clarity may be hard to hear. Some things are hard, no matter how they're said. Some things are hard. So here's a tip. You may have heard the advice that you should save all of the emails where your supervisor thanks or praises you. And these can come in really handy when you feel that you haven't been heard because you didn't get what you wanted, or when your boss's clarity stings, or when they were just plain mean about it. There was a morning for me where at 4 a.m., I was up and printing off a thank you note from my boss. I then read it out loud to 4 different friends of mine in an asynchronous chat program. They got it later when they woke up, but I felt better right then. Don't just save those emails in a folder. Let them help you when the going is tough. And let's talk just for a second here about the difference between when a boss is being kind and when a boss is being nice. It is kind to tell you that the budget for your project has been discontinued before you do any more work on it, but it's not nice. Kindness proceeds from benevolence, and benevolence can be defined as well-meaning. Nice is something prettier, shinier, easier to look at. It's pleasing, it's agreeable, delightful even. And it's important to recognize the difference between those two things. So as we know, choices that we make at work have consequences. The choices our bosses make have consequences. And these choices and consequences impact our mental health. They impact our ability to pay rent and to retire comfortably. Hard things happen at work. I'm not sure if it's uniquely American, but I see a lot of situations where our initial impulse when something is going wrong in the workplace is to find the right person to fix our boss or fix the situation. And sometimes that person isn't out there. Remember that it is the role of supervisors, human resources, and your boss's boss to protect the institution. And it is your job to protect yourself in difficult situations. Sometimes modeling behavior with kindness is the best way to bring your boss's attention to how you want to be treated. And not every situation can be fixed. And we may find that in our hour of greatest need, of greatest discomfort, and in our time of hurt, a person to correct the situation or to fix our boss is not out there. And we have to rely on ourselves, and we have to rely on our resiliency. Here's something else that is important to remember. Don't give a bad situation room to grow. Don't feed it. Sometimes doing nothing is your best option. Sometimes doing nothing includes not talking about a bad situation at work, not involving other people. Keeping one's counsel is harder than finding comfort or support with other like-minded people. But nothing, I repeat, nothing that your boss does is worth you doing something that will make the situation worse for yourself. There are many times that no matter how right we are, we can't fix a situation or change another person. And this is where the resiliency skill of having a realistic sense of control and the limitations of our control come back into play. You may not always get the best outcome in a situation, but you will be okay. As you are navigating these choices, bring your best self and do what you respect. And then no matter the outcome of those choices, including impacts to your career and your mental health, you will respect yourself, which is better than the alternative. And you will be okay no matter what comes next for you. As hard as these resiliency skills are to develop, the dividends they pay to our future selves in our professional lives, as well as in our personal lives, make that work worth it. These are skills and attitudes that are 100% within our control to cultivate. Some of them may not come naturally to you, and that's okay. It's not a failure to have a bad reaction to someone else's bad reaction. It's human. But if you work on having a higher tolerance for other people's negative affect, it will help you. And that's the important part, that building resiliency will help you in many situations, on and off the job. Even while building those skills is hard work or it's uncomfortable. So sometimes in the work environment, while we are focusing so much on productivity, we're focusing to the exclusion of the internal work we need to do to be successful. And we need to refocus on our own internal work. Okay, last section. This is where I address the worst of the worst scenarios. Sometimes your boss is going to do something that is really, really, really bad. It goes way beyond just unprofessional. It sells you out. It hurts you. It hurts your colleagues. It hurts the library. It is socially unacceptable in any and every situation. It displays an astonishing lack of good judgment or civility, something that for you cannot be fixed. So take some time for yourself about it. If you're angry, be angry. If you resent them, resent them. Honor the hurt and honor the damage that they did. And when you come to a place in your own life, in your own personal growth story, where you are at peace about it and where you can forgive your boss for what they did, don't tell them. Thank you for being a part of the library community, making these hard decisions. We are in good company. We can help each other grow, and we can grow alongside one another. Once again, I am Sonya Schryer Norris at Plum Librarian LLC. I currently work as the Niche Academy consultant to the Library of Virginia. You can reach me anytime at librarian@sonyanorris.com. I've also consulted for multiple other library organizations and state library agencies, and I worked in library development and statewide services for the State Library of Michigan for 16 years. So thank you, and once again, feel free to contact me anytime.
Thank you, Sonya, for being here today, and thank you everyone for attending our webinar. If you have any other questions, please feel free to reach out to the speaker or conference host using the Whova app. An evaluation will be provided with the conference session resources, and we welcome your feedback about the session and the conference. Thanks everyone for making the 2023 Southeast Collaborative Conference successful. See you all next year.